Welcome back to CCNA 1. We're going to talk about different network attacks. So malware really is just short for malicious software. So any kind of, and if you didn't know mal is the Latin root for bad, right? That's all it means is bad. So bad software is really all it means, right? Malicious means it's bad. It's just a fancy word for bad. So anything that attempts to damage, disrupt, steal, or inflict bad or illegitimate action on our data, our hosts, or our networks. There's different kinds of malware. There's viruses, which you're probably familiar with. You probably don't know that viruses and malware aren't the same thing. Viruses specifically are inside of another program. So really we need a human interaction to spread a virus, right? It has to be installed. The human has to click on maybe a bad Word document, maybe a bad Excel spreadsheet, maybe it's got macros in it or something like that, and it can spread from computer to another, leaving infections as it travels. You also have worms, which are similar to viruses in that they replicate. The only thing is that they, unlike viruses, which require an infected host file, worms are standalone software and don't require a host program or human to help propagate. So basically, let me try to re-explain that. A virus requires human interaction. You've got to install something, you've got to click on something. And usually viruses will try to spread themselves. Maybe they will send out an email via your Outlook client and send out an email with this infected file to all of your coworkers. Now worms, once they're on your machine, then they use the network to travel to another machine, another machine, another machine, another machine. Worms are typically much more dangerous than viruses if someone becomes infected. There's also Trojan horses, which is really, if you don't know the story of the Trojan horse, a bunch of warriors, really, got into this giant fake horse, this wooden horse that was meant to look as a gift, and they hid inside there, and I believe it's the city of Troy. They got into the city because the people brought this wooden horse into their city, and I believe it's the city of Troy. Legend has it. I think it's a legend. I don't think it's official history, but anyway, so they waited until nightfall and they busted out of the wooden horse and took the city over. Kind of caught them with the pants down, so to speak. So really, it's a piece of software that looks legitimate. It looks good, but then when you install it, it actually infects your machine. So, like viruses, they must spread through user interaction, such as opening an email, attachment, or downloading and running a file from the internet, right? So they work a lot like viruses, except for they kind of disguise themselves as something legitimate. So maybe they're like, oh, there's this really cool piece of software I downloaded, it's really helpful. It cleans out your system, makes your computer run faster, and then it's actually a Trojan horse. That's a common scenario. So there's also reconnaissance attacks, and really this is not less of a technical attack and more of a really an idea. So we can have our reconnaissance attacks, which is really just kind of like discovering information and mapping of systems. And so maybe they'll look at a LinkedIn profile and figure out that you guys are exclusively a Cisco shop. You have on your LinkedIn profile that you've worked with Cisco ASAs, version XYZ, and so they look for vulnerabilities that are available for that version of code and see if they can compromise your system. Or maybe vulnerabilities that are inherent to the system that you're running in general. Maybe there's a 0 day or something that was just discovered, and so they may try that against your systems. It's very important to avoid, when you're on a place like LinkedIn, to avoid letting people know what vendor you use, letting people know specific model numbers of what you use. Usually want to avoid that on your LinkedIn. Now, when you're going to interview, people are probably going to ask you, okay, well, what vendor did you use for your firewalls? I see you've got extensive experience with firewalls. What vendor did you use? You go, oh, I use Palo Alto or whatever. Usually, hopefully, you're among friends and they're not trying to hack your previous employer. But leaving that kind of stuff on LinkedIn is usually a no-no. Access attacks. So maybe we try to manipulate data or system access, other user privileges, right? We try to get into an account. We also have a denial of service, which is basically just overwhelming a system with too many requests that are fake. So a lot of reconnaissance attacks can actually happen without going into your network at all. They can use internet tools, right? NSLOOKUP, who is. They can determine IP addresses that you use. They can also go to places like Facebook, LinkedIn, other media sites, maybe GitHub. Maybe you shared some of the code you wrote for something for your site that you use at your business. They can be very, very dangerous places to put information up on the internet. They may have way more information on you than you could ever imagine before actually sending any data to your network. Very, very scary. So, access attacks. They can exploit known vulnerabilities in authentication services, FTP services maybe, or web services to gain entry into web accounts, confidential databases, other sensitive information, right? So we can go after passwords, right? We can try to do a brute force, put some kind of virus or Trojan on your computer, use packet sniffers to try to intercept your traffic. Excuse me. Maybe we're trying to exploit the trust of someone. We're trying to, maybe do some phishing or vishing, right? We call up somebody, hey, I'm from IT, I'm new here. I need to log into your computer. Can you download this piece of software? Maybe port redirection. So maybe we use SSH port 22 to connect to a compromised host. Then host A is trusted by host B, and therefore the threat actor can use telnet port 23 to access it, or another protocol. We can also do a man in the middle, which is where we have two legitimate entities and we put ourselves between them, and then we're able to do stuff like use packet sniffers to see all that data. Or maybe we can modify it even. Denial of service attacks really is just overwhelming a system. So think of a bus system, and you ride the bus every day to work, and it's great, it's affordable, and you're saving the planet or whatever. And so you use the bus system every day for work. Well, one day somebody pays, say the bus holds 50 people, they pay 50 people $500 to get on the bus before anyone else does. So you've got 50 people that jump on the bus. Well, now there's no bus seats available. Well, now you can't ride the bus because a bunch of people were paid money, really, to jump on the bus and take up all the spots. This is a denial of service. Now, usually this is done by kind of having a virus or a Trojan on many different computers that all act as what's called a botnet, which is really just a network of bots that are controlled to do these denial of service attacks. Really, ultimately, they prevent an authorized person from using a legitimate system. To prevent it, we have to use the latest security updates, right? We have to have the latest and greatest stuff. In some cases, you may have seen stuff like Cloudflare is very popular for denial of service prevention. There are some services we can use, such as proxies, to help with that as well, depending on your situation. But of course, your miles may vary. So usually, they're a big risk, really, because they cause problems. You lose time and probably money. They're really simple, and you don't need really any skills to do them. So the good news is they're very trackable. So it's very, very easy to track down where denial of service is coming from. And, if there's some kind of high-profile denial of service, there's been cases where the federal government got involved and actually tracked down people at their houses and got them in big, big trouble. So don't try this at home. So a DDoS is similar to denial of service attack, but really it's from a bunch of different places like a botnet, right? So we may call our bots zombies. Sometimes they're called zombies in a botnet. The threat actor uses a command and control server, right? Some kind of server that connects to this botnet to carry out the attack. So that's all we have for 16.2. Join me in the next section. We'll talk about some of the ways we can mitigate some of these threats and these attacks we've talked about. I'll see you then.